Today we're going to learn how all of the trades work together on a job site and how they communicate. More specifically, how the masons interact or communicate with the electricians, with the carpenters, with the plumbers, with the painters, with the HVAC guys, with the sprinkler fitters, and even within the masonry trade, how there's communication between the foreman and the masons and the laborers or tenders. Or maybe there's a specific sawman on the job with the masons. There's a lot of miscommunication on the job site, and it leads to trades making a more difficult time for other trades to complete their job. Ideally, there should be zero verbal communication. There are visual cues to know when it's a certain trade's time to be on the wall or do their job within the wall. So what we're going to do is we're going to make pretend we are in a school, and we're going to build a classroom wall within a school. This is a commercial application, but this can easily be a residential application as well. This is our wall line. Wall lines can be established by either the lead carpenter, the masonry foreman, or the superintendent. In this case, being that carpenters are going to be on this wall first, setting their door frame, the lead carpenter has established this wall line. Here's the carpenter now. He's got every tool that Home Depot offers attached to him, yet it still takes him 4 hours to set a door frame.
Okay, you're all set. You should be good to go now. Just check it as you go.
That ain't gonna happen, buddy. Also, you gotta put spreaders in the door. You gotta go get the door ties. Look, masons aren't gonna check the door as they go. If it's set out of plumb or out of rack, it's gonna remain out of plumb or out of rack once the masons are finished.
Okay, give me a few minutes.
Here the carpenter is installing 2 spreaders and wrapping the frame with tie wire. Believe it or not, this is a time lapse of 1 week. Here we have the door frame installed by the carpenter. The carpenter also installed these wooden spreaders. That's going to keep the door frame from taking an hourglass figure once the masons start loading up the sides of the frame with mortar. The carpenter also installed a wire tie that goes around the frame, keeping the frame tight to the spreaders. The carpenter left the door ties that come included with the frame when you purchase a frame. What's not so great here is the anchoring system that the carpenter used. The carpenter anchored the door frame to the mason's material on the ground. Ideally, these buck-ups, these adjustable buck-ups, will be set up high and out of the way. This material on the ground is going to get kicked, it's going to get bumped, it's going to get hit by a wheelbarrow and knock this frame out of rack or out of plumb. Not a good idea to anchor to the mason's material. Ideally, you would use a cleat, something like this, if you have to anchor it to the ground. This would be tack-conned to the floor, then you can anchor your buck-ups right to this. This isn't going to move once anchoring to the ground. I'm not going to do that in this scenario because this is like a classroom setting and I don't want to damage the floor. This is the finished floor in here. Now that the frame is set, we're ready to begin our block layout course. This is usually done by the masonry foreman, depending on the size of the job. We're going to be using double bullnose block around the door frame because the corners of the block are going to be exposed, and that's what's required to be used inside of a school building. We need to make pretend that there's 2 perpendicular walls on the outside of our wall, making our wall sort of like a partition wall. Here the foreman is laying out the first course of block. This establishes the bond or the spacing of the block work. He's also getting the top of the first course level from end to end. This makes it easier for the mason to just stay on 8-inch increments the rest of the way. Now we have the wall laid out. This is the next visual cue for other trades. So far we had the wall line established. That's the first visual cue for the carpenter. Come set the door frame. Once the door frame is up, that's the next visual cue for the mason, saying, yeah, go ahead and lay out the wall. Well, now it's laid out. This is where things start getting a little busier. This is the visual cue for the electricians. The electricians should start coming over and laying out where their boxes are going to go in the wall. This is where the plumber should come over and start laying out where his pipe is going to be set in the wall. Let's say for a water fountain. This is the point at which the laborer, mason tender, is going to come over and see how many block are needed, what kind of block are needed, and get them set. This is where the saw man is going to come over, see if there's any specific saw cuts that need to be made, such as around electrical boxes, or around the door frames, or at the ends of the wall, at the jambs. This is where things start picking up, and this is where mistakes start being made. This is George the Sawman, also known as Mad at the World Guy. He's going to come over and see if there's any special cuts that need to be made for the wall. George, I don't want to have to lay half block on the left side of the door frame. Just get the whole block and cut center scores in there so it looks like a joint in the middle of the block. George isn't really writing anything down. In fact, the pen that he's holding doesn't even work. All George is thinking about is how he can make this job last as long as possible because it's so close to where he lives. Here comes the electrician now. Typically, late to the job every day, blames it on traffic, yet has enough time to stop at the store to get a cup of coffee. He's going to bring his blueprints over the wall, along with some trash, and mark the locations for his electrical boxes. Electricians, when marking the block work for your electrical box locations, don't use a magic marker like a Sharpie. Use something like a Keel. It's like a giant crayon. Magic markers and Sharpies tend to bleed through the paint later on, making it more difficult for the painters. Now, I don't know what it is exactly, but for some reason, the way he's marking that electrical box location makes me think that when nobody's looking, I bet you he eats those red crayons. Here the electrician is marking a double box or double gang box. He's using the correct symbols and matching them up with the proper prepared receptacle. This is a properly prepared electrical box. It has a symbol on it for what it is. In this case, this is going to be a receptacle. It has the height on it marked in Mason terms. What that means is this is labeled exactly where it's supposed to go in the wall. It says B3, which means this goes at the bottom of the third course. Electricians, you need to use masonry terms when marking out your heights for boxes. Don't use the exact measurement. What I mean is, this box is going to go at 18 inches. Well, electricians know that that's 18 inches to the center of the box. If you mark 18 inches on the wall, the mason is going to put the bottom of the box at 18 inches, and it's going to look like a horrible installation. Masons prefer that the boxes either go at the top of the block or at the bottom of the block. And as an electrician, you need to understand that each course is 8 inches in height. Labeling this B3 puts this box at exactly 18 inches to the center. Good job, Sparky. Knowing that there's two sides of the wall. Don't want to miss any boxes on the other side. Here the electrician is marking the location for the light switch as you walk in the door. Don't even bother picking up the trash that you put in your own way. Just move it aside and somebody else will get it. Sparky, can you move that switch one cell over to the right?
What's a cell?
It's the holes in the block. Can you move the switch 8 inches over to the right? There's a lintel going over the door, and the conduit's going to go right into the bottom of the lintel.
No, it's got to go here.
I'll make it offset. Whatever. This box also has the proper length extension on here, the proper length conduit. This is 40 inches long. When this is installed in the block work, the top of the conduit is going to be about 4 inches above where the mason stops for scaffolding to be built. That's the ideal height for a mason to pick block up over. Do not leave a crazy long extension on here. That's going to make the mason upset, having to pick the block up even higher to get it up over the conduit, or make special cuts to get around the conduit. 4 inches above scaffold height, or 4 inches above the 7th block course, is a good height to stop at. Here the electrician is finishing up putting couplings on the conduit to prepare for future extensions, but putting a piece of tape over the coupling also to keep the mason's debris from clogging up the conduit. Electricians, when you're done marking out your box locations, try to leave as big of a mess as possible so that other trades know you were here and you did your job. This is our next visual cue. Whatever you do, don't invest in a broom and pick up after yourselves. At this point, we're ready to send the labor over and start stocking up the wall, getting it ready for the masons to build the wall. Here comes Chris, the laborer. I'm not sure if he cut those jeans himself or if he's wearing his girlfriend's capris. Chris starts by cleaning up after the electrician. He's getting a block count and stocking just enough block for the masons. Chris also notices the particular electrical box cuts that will be needed, along with the special double bullnose cuts for the door jambs. He also knows that wire gets used every other course and gets enough to top out the wall. Let's take a look at where we're at so far. We have the wall laid out, the electrical boxes are marked, the electrician covered his conduit, covered his couplings with tape to keep mortar from falling down the conduit when the mason is laying block. The laborer stocked this up correctly. There's just enough block here to get scaffold high. Also, the laborer noticed that he needed electrical box cuts. He has the appropriate electrical box cuts here, including the one for the switch next to the door. The laborer also sprinkled sand all over the ground. This is to keep mortar from sticking to the floor. The laborer is going to have to clean it up later, so he's making it easier for himself later. Don't judge a book by its cover. Laborers are some of the smartest workers on the job site. They control the flow of the job, how quickly a job gets done. If this is stocked incorrectly, doesn't have the right stuff, doesn't have the right material, including wire that he stocked up behind the wall, it can really slow progress down. Here comes the bricklayer now. Looks like a hobo that's about to jump on a moving train. This is Dave the bricklayer. He wants everything set up behind him just perfect. If there's no mud, he'll just stand there and wait. If there's no wire in sight, it won't get in the wall. If cuts are missing, he'll go on a 15-minute stroll to get a cut from George the Sawman. Dave doesn't want to have to think to build a wall, and he definitely doesn't want any responsibility if it's constructed wrong. However, he wants all the credit if it's constructed right. Here he's preparing the cells for electrical box installation. He's choking off the cells and throwing some mortar in on top.
As Dave's building the wall, he's making sure to get each electrical box in the appropriate spot. He throws a couple trowelfuls of mortar into each of the box's cells, securing each electrical box within the cell. If the wall was never labeled, the electrician just got buried. Dave doesn't know that he's about to bury the plumber.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! I've got a plumbing pipe to put in here. There's a water fountain that goes in here. How come you didn't tell me you were building this wall?
That's not my job, buddy. You were supposed to be here when the electrician was marking out his boxes. That's when you put your plumbing pipe in. I ain't got time to be making all these cuts for your plumbing pipe.
Well, just put it right now. Put it on top of this line of brick you got going here.
All right. I'll put it in for you this time. But next time, I'ma bury you. And pull your pants up. When you turn around, I can see your... You know. Who are you? What do you want?
I'm Aiden. I'm the inspector.
Inspector? What do you want to inspect?
I don't see any wire in this wall. Are you putting it in?
Yeah, it's in the wall.
Well, I can't see it.
Because it's ladder wire. You can't see the ladder wire in the wall. No, you put the ladder part, right where the cross webs are.
Well, I don't see it around anywhere.
It's right there. What are you eating?
Sushi.
Everybody's always eating something, except me. I ain't got nothing to eat.
Now we're about halfway done the wall. We're at scaffold height. This is the next visual cue for a couple more trades to come into play. We'll go over the trades that we've had interactions with so far. The carpenters, plumbers, and electricians. We're gonna make pretend that this wall was built yesterday and that this mortar has had time to set up in the wall and inside the door frame. At this point, the carpenter can remove the spreaders from the door. The door frame is no longer going to bow in from the weight of the mortar. The mortar's set up. There's 2 door ties left that the carpenter can just simply put on the wall. The mason will install them in the door frame higher up. It's also a good idea for the carpenter to remove the buck up system. Whatever system he used to keep this door plumb and in rack. If not, the mason's going to remove that system. And the mason isn't as gentle with that system as a carpenter will be. Here the mason installed an electrical box, labeled as a switch. It's installed top of the 6th course, labeled T6. The cell that it's sitting in has been filled solid with mortar, so we can't move this electrical box into the wall or out. It's flush with the block work. The mason also filled a small gap around the outside of the box. That'll be covered by the switch plate cover later on. Here the mason installed a receptacle box at the bottom of the third course, or 18 inches in height in electrical terms. The sawman could have did a better job and not cut this box so deep into the block, but the sawman's a hack, and now the mason has to fill in above this electrical box with mortar. It's not that big of a deal. It'll be covered by the receptacle plate cover later on. Luckily, the plumber got to the wall just in time to get his pipe installed for a water fountain. Plumbers get to leave long extensions on their pipe. This cuts down on the amount of fittings that are needed, which cuts down on the amount of potential leaking points in the pipe. Because this wasn't marked on the layout before the electrician got here marking his boxes, the electrician didn't realize there was a water fountain here. Now we're going to have to install another electrical box below this pipe using what's called MC. We're going to need to fish this through the cell down to an electrical box that we're going to have to cut in. Mistakes happen all the time on a job site, and in this case, the electrician forgot to mark out for a box for the water fountain. Depending upon the relationship that the masons have with the electricians, sort of determines who's going to cut this box out. If an electrician needs to cut it out, they're going to break out a grinder and they're going to cut this tracing out and dust out the whole place. The mason needs to make this box cut. They're just going to do it with a hammer, and it's going to take them just a minute or two.
Now that the wall is scaffold high, it's time for the electrician to install extensions. He takes the tape off the coupling, and instead of reusing it, we'll just throw it on the ground because that makes a bigger mess. We'll get a new piece of tape and put it on top of the extension before installing it. The extensions are about 40 inches in height. That makes it to the next jump up height for the masons on their scaffold. Now the electrician needs to fish the MC down to the electrical box he's going to install that he forgot. He doesn't realize that it would be way easier to do if he would just put his phone down for a minute.
Getting the wall scaffold high is the visual cue for two trades in particular to get their stuff together: the HVAC company and the sprinkler fitters. Let's take a close look at how they communicate with the masons. This is how the HVAC guy is usually going to mark the wall for his duct opening. He's going to mark the exact width of the duct opening along with the exact size, width, and height of the duct opening. Also, at which point the duct opening begins. Bottom of duct, BOD, at 9 foot. At 9 foot, that's where a 24-inch by 24-inch opening starts, located at this point in the wall. The sprinkler fitter is going to leave his sleeve or sleeves on top of the wall for the mason to install later on. The sprinkler fitter labeled the sleeves exactly where they go. It says sits on top of 9 foot 4. That would be the 14th course in masonry terms. 18 inches off of the wall, off of the make-pretend perpendicular wall that's at the end of our wall. Nobody knows what the HVAC guy or the sprinkler guy looks like. You never see them on the job. They're like ghosts. We're going to make pretend that the wall is finished. The last trade to get to the wall is the painters. Painters, don't paint the wall if the wall hasn't been rubbed down yet. If you see big chunks of mortar sticking out of the wall, that means the wall hasn't been rubbed down or scraped down. Masons, before the painter gets to the wall, you need to let them know that it's okay to paint the wall and that the wall has been scraped or rubbed down. Label the wall. Done. Real obvious for the painter. Carpenters, if you have hardware that needs to be installed in this door, such as a closer, you need to put something in the door head, such as a piece of wood or a piece of foam, because the mason is going to load up that door head with mortar, and you're not going to be able to get your screws into the door head. That about wraps it up for the trades communication video. Most of the communication is done through visual cues, as you can see. Verbal communication comes about when problems arise, and we try to eliminate that. Thanks for watching. Don't even bother subscribing. Masons, once the wall gets above ceiling and the electrical conduit is stubbed out of the wall, before you lay block around it, put in an extra elbow that leads to nowhere. The electricians enjoy that.